I'm going to now be delving into the battles and wars section of the tours, one of which I'll probably listen to quite closely, which is the second one there. Huzzah. Anyway, we'll get going. Start with Spartan education. Chickens and what greased by the Persians during the Persian War. So everyone got their winner chicken dinner. Alright, Leonidas, teach me.
Welcome, visitor, to where Spartan boys become Spartan men. I can't help but be reminded of the boy I used to be. I wonder what...
Strange that I'm still alive, even though I died years ago.
Would he be proud? Intimidated? Or would he pity the tired old man standing in front of him? But such thoughts are meaningless. Let us move on. The Agogi was Sparta's strict education system. The strenuous...
Strange that this wasn't put in the politics section, but okay.
And then reshaped them until nothing was left but the strength, intelligence, and resolve of a perfect Spartan citizen. I will find you once your visit has ended, and we will talk further. Until then, visitor.
What is your profession? I'm a farmer. Kill that man.
Sparta was a Greek city located in the Peloponnese. It differed from other cities of the time in that it had no walls. Sparta originated as 4 neighboring villages: Patani, Limnes, Mizoa, and Cynosura, all of which shared the same political, military, and religious life. After 2 wars with the Messenians, the city's territory expanded even further. By the 5th century BCE, they allegedly controlled almost half of the Peloponnese.
The Dorians inhabited the valley of Eurotas in the 12th century BCE and founded Sparta by the 10th century BCE. In Greek mythology, Sparta was the daughter of King Eurotas, that one, of Laconia, and the wife of King Lacedaemon. The city of Sparta was named after her, though the city was also called Lacedaemon, but Sparta was the capital of the Lacedaemonians. Lacedaemonians? Lacedominos.
The Agoge was the military training and education program undergone by Sparta's male youth. Grooming men for war was one of the city's main priorities. Boys began their training at the young age of 7 and completed it when they were 30. It has been said that Spartan infants were inspected for weakness shortly after birth. If they were deemed too sickly, they were thrown into chasms. However, this information remains unproven.
Unproven,
were considered suitable for training. When they came of age,
I don't know,
they
this
were
suck.
removed from their families and were placed into service of the state. Their education included subjects like reading, writing, and even music, but was mostly focused on tough military exercises meant to turn the boys into efficient soldiers. The Agoge was divided into 3 cycles. One for boys aged 7 to 12, one for adolescents aged 12 to 20, and one for men aged 20 to 30. Each cycle included different exercises for refining the body and mind.
The organisation of Sparta's education system is attributed to Lycurgus, the mythical Spartan lawgiver, who may not have existed. The agoge system not only educated and socialised Spartan youth, passing the agoge was a political requirement to become a Spartan citizen, and failing the programme or refusing to participate resulted in complete exclusion from Spartan citizenry. What, not even allowed to retake it? Okay then. I mean, they were looking for the best of the best, so...
Sparta played a large role in defeating the Persians during the Greco-Persian Wars in the 5th century BCE. They held their king Leonidas' glorious death at the Battle of Thermopylae in particularly high esteem. Because Leonidas was killed in battle, Sparta believed he died a good death and showed incredible bravery, qualities to be held as a model for all Spartans. This idealized bravery was embedded in the city's collective memory and was the main quality people strove for in the agoge.
According to Pausanias, Leonidas' tomb was located near the Chalkioikos sanctuary. The tomb contained Leonidas' bones, which were collected from their original resting place in Thermopylae before being returned to Sparta. How did they know they were his? To honour Leonidas' heroic death, the Spartans held annual speeches and competed in special games reserved only for the citizens, called the Spartalympics, probably. Actually, I think it was called that. I seem to recall reading somewhere something about the Spartan Olympics, called the Spartalympics. Or someone used the term anyway.
The first cycle of the agoge focused on boys aged 7 to 12. Each of the boys had shaved heads and wore light clothing. They walked everywhere barefoot, swam the Odyssey River all year long, slept on reeds, and participated in cult rituals for Artemis or Thea. The boys were grouped into herds, or agoli, and were supervised by older adolescents. Once they reached the age of 12, they entered the second cycle of the agoge, which aimed to integrate them into the society of citizen soldiers.
The young girls of Sparta participated in a system that was similar in some ways to the agoge, but less severe. They were trained in music and dance, but also running and wrestling. Not going to say what I thought there. They avoided wearing jewellery and perfume, and in general had much more freedom compared to women in the rest of the Greek world. Athens. Waiting for the loading day.
The agoge's second cycle included boys aged 12 to 20. When they reached the age of 20, the young men were dubbed Erinyes and could officially serve as hoplites in the Spartan army. Until the age of 30, Spartan men lived in communal mess halls called Sosgenia. From the age of 22 onward, they were permitted to start a family, but 30 was viewed as a more appropriate age to get married. Spartan men served in the military until they turned 60, when they were designated as elders, or gerontes. However, many were known to continue serving anyway, such as King Archimedes III, who fought in the army until he was killed in battle at the age of 62.
The agoge encouraged the education of many peculiar practices, one of which was theft. Young Spartans were encouraged to steal food to supplement their meals, and if they were caught, they were severely punished. Not for stealing, for being caught. Another unique educational practice was the Krypteia, in which elite 18-year-old Spartans were sent off on their own with only a knife and basic equipment. During this time, their main goal was allegedly to hunt down and exterminate helots. Hooray! Plutarch believed this practice was Sparta's reaction to the Helot revolt of 460 BCE. So, see, I did say it wasn't just a one-off thing. but it's also possible that it existed as far back as the 7th century BCE. Plato, meanwhile, said that the Crypteia was meant to teach Spartan youth how to conduct clandestine operations and survive under difficult conditions. What, Black Ops training then? Progress in the Ogege was also tied with the growing of hair and facial hair. At the age of 20, Spartan men were permitted to grow their hair long, and at 30 they were finally allowed to grow moustaches. Moustache! Ah, lucky for me then.
All adult male Spartans participated in communal meals called syssitia. The attending Spartans contributed different kinds of food on a monthly basis, in addition to a small sum of money to pay for meat. Each man was entitled to one portion of a meal, with the exception of the kings, who received 2 portions. Syssitia attendance was mandatory for every Spartan fortunate enough to be part of the group. The meals had great political significance. According to Xenophon and Plutarch, the syssitia was designed to foster a sense of equality between citizens. It also demonstrated the self-restraint and moderation of Spartan society. But in reality, the syssitia only increased the differentiation between the rich and the poor. Those who could not afford to contribute to the communal food not only missed their meals, but also lost their right of citizenship.
Jeesh. Bunch of dicks. Although communal meals were common in other Greek cities, Sistertia was unique in that they were let me get my words out. They were a key part of both Lacedaemonian ideology and Spartan citizenship. Sistertia took place 3 times a day. Spartans started the morning with a breakfast, or the acratisma, we'll go with that, of bread and wine, and then ate lunch, ariston, and dinner, iklon, later on in the day. The communal meals menu included flour, just raw flour, wine, cheese, and figgies, but the most popular food in Sparta was melas zomos, black broth, a soup made with meat and pig's blood. Oh, black pudding then, but black soup.
Your tour has ended. As you have seen, the Agogi was not for the weak or faint of heart, but it did its job in producing skilled warriors and shrewd citizens. What else would you like to do?
Quiz me.
So you think you are ready for a test? Very well. Let us see how you fare. First, a simple question. The Agogi was made up of how many cycles?
3.
Correct. The Agogi was divided into 3 cycles. One for boys aged 7 to 12, one for adolescents aged 12 to 20, and one for men aged 20 to 30. Next question. How many meal portions were kings entitled to at Syssitia? Yes, Spartan kings had the right to double portions. One final question. When were Spartans allowed to grow mustaches?
Oh, 30.
Yes. Once a Spartan man was over 30, he was allowed to adorn his face with a glorious display of manhood. Impressive, visitor. You should be proud.
So I should be. Now I'm going to wee off now. Bye.
Safe travels, visitor.
The next one I'm definitely going to have to pay attention to, for one of my essays I'm doing involves this. The Battle of Running Around a Bit. The beach. And what is life but a beach?
Welcome, traveler, to the site of the legendary Battle of Marathon. It's truly incredible that such a small place would have such tremendous significance. But then again, even the tiniest pebble can send ripples through the water. Marathon was the location of one of the greatest battles in Greek history. It was here where Athenians made a stand against the might of an imposing Persian fleet. Your visit will take you through the causes of the conflict, the battle itself, and its far-reaching consequences. I will see you again once you're through. Farewell for now.
In 490 BCE, 600 Persian triremes landed on a beach 35 kilometers north of Athens. Standing in their way were 11,000 hoplites, led by the prestigious Athenian general Miltiades. The Persian forces outnumber the Greeks approximately 5 to 1, and yet the smaller force managed to push back their would-be conquerors. The Battle of Marathon was a major turning point in the Greco-Persian Wars, and the Athenians' victory would be celebrated for many years. The modern-day distance-running event is named a marathon in memory of a soldier from the battle who ran back to Athens to announce their victory, though whether this is real or legend is uncertain.
We're not entirely sure. It could be a lie. Huh. Might be a useful thing to add to something. Anyway, the Persian army had many bow-wielding horsemen. Because of this, its forces were very mobile and especially effective on the dry, rocky terrain of the Middle East. However, Persian cavalry were much less comfortable in mountainous regions and wooded areas, which was pretty much Greece in a nutshell. It's part of the reason why I think they lost so easily. I'll say easily, they weren't that easy because they managed to get all the way to Athens,
Persians
but...
wanted to invade Greece in part due to its rich silver mines. In 545 BCE, they came closer to this goal after their victory over Croesus, the king of Lydia. The victory forced some Greek populations in Asia Minor to surrender, and gave the Persians a solid foothold to carry out a large-scale invasion. In 494 BCE, the city of Miletus revolted against its Persian rulers. They were aided by Athens and the nearby city of Eretria, and even burned down an important Persian temple. The Persian king Darius was enraged by their sacrilege, and in 491 BCE sent messengers to the Greek cities demanding their submission. Athens and Sparta killed the Persian messengers, goading Darius to invade. The Persians began their attacks, first capturing the city of Naxos and enslaving its inhabitants, then taking the city of Eretria. Filled with confidence from their string of victories, the Persians set their sights on Athens.
The Persian king Darius proclaimed that he was chosen by the god Ahura Mazda to be king of kings. I'll have to look into that. And master of the world. I'm still picturing the 301. I am the kings and master of the world. He did his best to live up to those titles and conquered Egypt, Babylonia, the Lydian section of Asia Minor, as well as several smaller states. Darius... Oh no, I'm thinking of Xerxes, never mind. I'm thinking of his son. Darius allowed his subjects a fair amount of autonomy, but also demanded yearly tributes as well as troops in the event of a war. So not much different from an actual, medieval lord then.
The Greeks were surprised by the ferocity of the Persian attacks. Seeking aid against the upcoming invasion, Athens was forced to appeal to other cities for help. In a surprising move, they asked for aid from Sparta, known for having the strongest army in Greece. The Spartans agreed to the request, but they were unable to send reinforcements in time due to the religious feast of Apollo Carneos, which forbade them from leaving their city until the next full moon. The only extra help Athens managed to acquire was from the small Boeotian city of Plataea, which sent an additional 1,000 hoplites. This was the first time in Greek history that their entire civilization was under attack from an external invader. Despite sharing the same language and same religion, Greek city-states had often warred amongst themselves. The Persian invasion was the first time they realized the necessity of collective action to ensure their survival.
Plataea was the site of the famous Battle of Plataea. Of course, one of the most important battles in the Greco-Persian Wars. The battle ended in a decisive victory for the Greeks, who managed to successfully repel the Persian invaders. And is that it? Some of these are a bit.
The Persian fleet originally planned to land at the port of Phaleron. However, the exiled Athenian tyrant Hippias, who sided with the Persians, advised them to land at Marathon instead, where it would be easier to deploy cavalry. The Athenians were unaware of the Persian battle plans and left Marathon undefended. This allowed the Persians to quietly set up camp on the beach, while Athens scrambled to mount a defense.
No idea what he's trying to be wearing there. For a while, Phaleron served as Athens' main port. This changed after the general and politician Themistocles, there you go, encouraged the development of the natural harbours of Piraeus. Piraeus turned into a bustling port of its own, and Phaleron was gradually abandoned. That got anything to do with the Persians? It's the place where they tried to land, yeah, but...
The Persians' overwhelming numerical superiority forced the Athenians to get creative with their defensive strategy. The city sent 10,000 hoplites, along with the extra 1,000 Plataean reinforcements, to a hill located above the Persian encampment. Once in position, Athenians had to decide whether to wait for the Persians to attack or to strike them first. Athens' strategists believed the former option was better, but the general Miltiades believed a first strike was more advantageous, as the Persians had their backs to the sea. In the end, Miltiades' opinion prevailed, and the Greeks made their move.
Before the Battle of Marathon, the general Miltiades was suspected of aspiring to tyranny. After his victory, however, he was returned to Athens a hero. Miltiades took advantage of his newfound popularity to request a large fleet. While he kept the reason for his request a secret, it was eventually revealed that he was using Athenian military resources to wage a personal war against the city of Paros. Miltiades' siege of Paros was unsuccessful, and the general suffered an injury that later led to gangrene. Hooray! When he returned to Athens, he was put on trial for his actions, and though he managed to avoid the death penalty, he was charged with an enormous fine. He died shortly thereafter, probably of gangrene. No idea what would give me that idea.
According to Herodotus, the Greek forces charged at the Persians without archers or cavalry. The Persians were unprepared for what they saw as an act of madness. While they were able to hold the Greeks back at first, they were eventually pushed back to their ships and forced to retreat. The Persians suffered heavy losses during the battle, with approximately 6,400 casualties. The Athenians, on the other hand, only lost 192 soldiers.
Which is a fairly decent number, to be fair. The Spartans that... Damn it. Hate my cough. Hate it. I want to get rid of it. The Spartans that Athens called on for aid did eventually make it to Marathon, but only after the battle was over. According to Herodotus, the Spartans toured the battlefield, praised the Athenians on their victory, and then departed. Just rocked up and were like, yeah, good job. Well, bye then. That's the thing, though, because they were literally like, what? Come and fight? Oh, no, mate, we've got this religious festival now. Nah, we can't fight, mate. Nah. Nah.
The victory
And then they
of
kind of regretted
Marathon
that decision, I
was
think.
considered miraculous. The Greeks attributed this miracle to the appearance of legendary heroes who they allegedly saw return from the dead to fight at their side in defense of the city. For example, several Athenians swore they saw the mythical king Theseus take up arms at Marathon, a scene which would later be depicted in Athens' Agora. Similarly, some hoplites attested that Heracles appeared at Marathon, clad in his lion skin and wielding a club. The supposed appearance of these heroes helped elevate the Battle of Marathon to a legendary status among the Greek people.
Heracles was renowned for his heroic feats and labours, but his death was surprisingly tragic. Was it? I mean, it was in a way, but... According to legend, Heracles' third wife, Deianira, was worried that her husband was having an affair. I mean... He brings back... No, you know what? I'll mention that afterwards, because he kind of was. Hoping to rekindle their love, Deianira gave Heracles a garment stained with the blood of a centaur who he once killed named Nessos. Unfortunately, the blood was poisoned, and after putting the garment on, Heracles' skin began burning. The pain was so unbearable that Heracles made a funeral pyre for himself on Mount Atea, or Euta? That one. Then ordered Philoctetes, "Oh God, I gotta set you on fire! What are you doing? Get your pyre!" The fire burned Heracles' mortal body, but Zeus raised his immortal side to Olympus. So he died for your sins. Anyway, so the story is, right, so... Well, the Nessus story is, Hercules and Deianira were going back home. And the centaur Nessus tried to, basically went, I'll help you cross. Takes his wife first, and then when he gets to the other side, he tries to rape her. So Hercules gets his bow, shoots these arrows were covered in Hydra blood, by the way, which is incredibly poisonous. And he shot one into Nessus, and obviously Nessus was dying. But as he was dying, he mixed his blood with the poison of the Hydra, and said, sort of bottled it somehow, and said, if you ever feel that your husband's going to go astray, cover a garment in this and he'll wear it and he'll forever love you, basically. So over, I don't know how many number of years it was, but there was a point where she starts to feel that way, that he doesn't love her anymore, and then he fucks off somewhere else. He goes back to I can't remember the name of the princess he takes, but he originally won a contest for the hand of this very beautiful princess. But the king refuses. But because Hercules was trying not to lose his temper and, get in trouble again, he decided to just let it go and walked away. After all his tasks were complete, he did go back to that kingdom. He murdered the king and took the daughter. Obviously, kind of maybe not knowing what that would mean to Deianira, because he's a bit of an idiot. Thinking with his dick, probably. So, Deianira sees Heracles with this princess, whose name is going to annoy me until I find it out, but I'll just go with it. So then she puts the cloak on. The stuff on the cloak. He puts the cloak on, and then he feels like he's burning. Tries to douse himself in a river. That doesn't work, and in the end he just goes "kill me" and just sets himself on fire. Although there's one documentary where I love this one documentary. Granted, it's a History Channel, so that's probably why it's shit. They were like, so Hercules completed his 12 tasks, and then just decided to set himself on fire and burn himself to death. Oh well. It's like, not very good.
After the Persians fled Marathon, they tried to invade Athens by way of the Bay of Phaleron. However, this gave the Athenians time to return to their city and mount a proper defense. Fearing further losses, the admiral of the Persian fleet called off their attack, and the Persians returned to their empire. Darius was furious at the campaign's failure, and decided to seek vengeance in a retaliatory expedition from both land and sea. Meanwhile, Sparta begrudgingly congratulated Athens on their victory.
The Athenians buried the soldiers who died at Marathon in a monumental tumulus. The tumulus featured 10 steles listing the names of the honoured dead from each tribe. A second tumulus, built for the Plataeans and slaves who died alongside the Athenians, was built even. The dead soldiers were granted, I like how the image is not appeared, it's just me. The dead soldiers were granted to the right to be worshipped as heroes, and even received the honour of a cult. When the general Myacides died, he was buried next to his men. Oh, that's nice. It's nice to know. I kind of want to look at that discovery point because I think it's got what I'm looking for, but I'll wait for the discovery episode.
The victory at Marathon marked the beginning of a new era for Athens. According to Herodotus, Athens' success at pushing back the Persians ranked them first in the ongoing competition between the Greek city-states. The Athenians immortalized their prestige by erecting monuments in both their own city and in Delphi. The Battle of Marathon was also perceived as a blow against tyranny. Tyranny went from being perceived as a simple flaw in authoritarian excess to major treason against the homeland, a sin that rulers would take great pains to avoid being accused of. This helped consolidate the institution of democracy for the next 2 centuries.
Hooray! Oh, the Athenian treasury. After the Battle of Marathon, the Athenians built a treasury in Delphi to express gratitude to Apollo, also to be like, hey, look at all the shit we've won. The small temple-shaped monument was built with spoils taken from the Persians at Marathon. The treasury's metopes depicted the exploits of Heracles and Theseus, the 2 mystical heroes who allegedly helped the Athenians fight the Persians back. Because they were there! They also features images of Athena and the Amazons. Because they were there! Maybe. We don't know. They might have been there.
I hope you enjoyed this look into the famous Battle of Marathon. It was not only a major turning point in the history
I thought that was a bug crawling across him then.
also for all of Greece. Its repercussions would be felt for many years to come. Is there anything else you'd like to do?
Quiz me!
Of course. Let's start with a simple question. Which Athenian general led the Greek forces at Marathon? Correct. Miltiades led the forces at Marathon, and it was his strategy that helped the Greeks push the Persians back. Time for another question. Which Greek city revolted against the Persians in 494 BCE? Persepolis was actually the ceremonial capital of the Persian Empire.
I was aware it was a Persian
I
Empire
doubt
thing.
it had much reason to revolt. Keep trying, though.
Try a bit later towards the...
No, I'm afraid Naxos was taken by the Persian fleet on their way to Athens. Try another.
I say that there was many revolts in Persia afterwards.
Correct. Miletus revolted against Persian rule, with support from both Athens and Eretria. One more question. Which other Greek city aided Athens at Marathon? Unfortunately, Eretria was taken by the Persians, and thus unable
I
to help.
really am just pulling...
Keep
It definitely wasn't Sparta, that I know.
Yes, Plataea sent 1,000 Oblides to aid the Athenian forces. Well done, traveler. You have learned much. Farewell, traveler. I hope to see you again soon.
Oh, do you? Well, I'm off now. Bye. To the next one. Ah, yes. The famous 120. Hello, random deer. And another random deer. Trying to stop me from going across.
Welcome, visitor, to Thermopylae. Thermopylae stirs many feelings in my heart. Rage at the Persians' arrogance. Regret that I could not do more. But mostly, I feel proud. Proud of my city, and of my men, who fought to protect the very soul of the Spartan people. For those few fateful days, they were my brothers. I miss them all. Thermopylae was where a courageous group of Spartans stood amongst other Greek soldiers and held off the forces of King Xerxes, the Persian. When you're done,
Xerxes,
find
Persian.
me and we'll speak more.
The Persian king Darius's cries of rage echoed for years after his humiliating defeat at Marathon. Even after
He
Darius's
threw a
death,
wobbly.
his son Xerxes continued to seek vengeance against the Greeks. According to Aeschylus, Asia was emptied of all its men. Greek spies brought the news of Xerxes' imminent invasion back to their homeland. Afterwards, many discussions were had on the best place to mount a defense. In the end, the Greeks decided on Thermopylae. The area featured a narrow pass that could act as a bottleneck for the Persian army, negating their numerical superiority. It also offered naval advantages, offering the Greek fleets opportunities for flanking. 5,000 Peloponnesian Greeks set up at a fort near the entrance of the narrow passage, otherwise known as the Hot Gates. Leading them was Leonidas, a Spartan king who prided himself on supposedly being a direct descendant of Heracles. Leonidas was accompanied by several elite soldiers who together made up the famous 300 Spartans.
The Battle of Marathon during the first Persian invasion of Greece taught the Greeks that they were stronger when united. With Xerxes' forces fast approaching, many cities gathered in Corinth, where they decided for the first time in their history to unite and form a common army. And a lot of naked bums and willies on show there. Yeah. Avert thy eyes, children.
The Persian army arrived in the summer of 480 BCE, preceded by a flood of rumors regarding their strength and numbers. It was claimed they consumed 6,000 tons of wheat every day, and that they dried every river and brook they passed to quench their near insatiable thirst. During their march to Thermopylae, the Persians faced no opposition, and in fact, increased their numbers further by recruiting more soldiers from other Greek cities and places like Thrace. According to Herodotus, the last count of the Persian fleet was numbered at 1,207 boats, mounted by approximately 240,000 men. He estimates the land army, meanwhile, was made up of more than 1 million men. The Greek forces at Thermopylae were heavily outnumbered.
According to Herodotus, the main weakness of the Persian army was that they lacked superior defensive equipment and were not as well trained as the Greeks. The Persians excelled at fighting on vast flat terrain but were less effective in mountainous and wooded regions. The Greek strategists used this to their advantage, trying to lure the Persians to fight on unfavourable terrain. I mean, that makes sense. Just be there like, oi, oi, you can't win. Or, of course, the famous, Persians, come and get them!
Xerxes believed that at the sight of his massive army, the Greeks at Thermopylae would flee in terror. Instead, they deliberated. The majority of the Peloponnesians wanted to engage the Persians on the Isthmus of Corinth. Leonidas, meanwhile, believed it was wiser to stay put in Thermopylae. While the Greek forces debated, a Persian horseman was sent to spy on the enemy. He returned to Xerxes with surprising news. Not only were the Greeks not fleeing, but the Spartans guarding the fort were exercising and combing their hair. Far cry from the fearful soldiers Xerxes expected. To increase the pressure on the Greeks, Xerxes waited 4 more days, then attacked on the 5th. The Persians faced heavy resistance and suffered many losses, and Herodotus says Xerxes leaped 3 times from his chair, seized with fear for his army. The following day proved to be just as difficult for the Persian forces, and the Greeks continued to stand their ground.
Xerxes was the son of Darius, the king who ordered the first Persian invasion of Greece, an invasion that proved unsuccessful. Xerxes himself became king around 486 BCE. Shortly after, he stopped revolts in both Egypt and Babylon, consolidating his power. With his subjects now in line, Xerxes set out to invade Greece, presumably to avenge the humiliation his father had suffered at the hands of the Greeks. Isn't that basically what the very first one said? Yeah, you can see some of them weren't well written.
The Persians seemed poised to be held at Thermopylae indefinitely, until an
So much so that they
informant
just
from the
popped
region
in.
came forward with information. He told the Persians of another route, which could take them around Thermopylae.
Cheeky
The
bastard.
Persian contingent was sent to verify the information. While there were Greek soldiers stationed to guard the route, they were forced to flee from the Persians. Thus, on the 3rd day of the battle, the Greeks were surrounded by their enemy.
Demaratos was a Spartan king who exiled himself to Persia, where he was welcomed into Xerxes' entourage. When Xerxes' forces were still in Asia Minor, the Persian king asked Demaratos if the Greeks would dare resist his massive army. To Xerxes' surprise, Demaratos told him that while Greece was a poor country, it was just wise and courageous. Okay. Oh, it was just wise and courageous. Okay. He also commented that the Spartans specifically would never flee and fight until they died. Upon hearing this, Xerxes erupted into laughter. However, Demaratos' words would be proven at Thermopylae. Probably would. Every man would run away from me. Whoa! No, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't.
With the Persians both in front of and behind them, the Greek forces at Thermopylae realized they had 2 choices: flee to live another day, or stand and fight till their last breath. Most of the Greeks chose the former option, but some stayed, including Leonidas and his 300 Spartans. For the Spartans, dying a glorious death was one of the highest honors they could achieve. The few members of Leonidas' Spartans who did not participate in the last stand at Thermopylae felt that they had missed an opportunity for honor and either committed suicide or continued living under the mockery and disgust of their fellow citizens. The Spartans' last stand was not only for glory, though. Had they not held off the Persians, the Greeks' retreating forces would probably have been cut down by enemy horsemen.
While the fighting went on at Thermopylae, a Greek fleet held off more Persians in a naval battle north of Euboea. The fleet used small boats to maintain a connection with the land forces at Thermopylae. Thermopylae? We'll go with, yeah, that's how you pronounce it, you fool. Thermopylae. Anyway, the battle started out in the Greeks' favour, mostly because a violent storm destroyed a large number of the Persian ships. However, after hearing news of the defeat at Thermopylae, the Greek fleet withdrew to Attica. So it's like, oh shit, they've been defeated, right, leg it! Row away!
On the morning of the third day, King Xerxes was assured of his victory. However, that victory did not come easy. King Leonidas himself fell in battle, and a furious fight broke out around his body. The Spartans fought to the last man, and when they had all been slain, Leonidas' body was brought before Xerxes. According to Herodotus, Persians usually honored the most courageous warriors, even if they were enemies. However, Xerxes was so consumed by rage at the Spartans' resistance that instead he cut off Leonidas' head and ordered it impaled on a stake. A statue of a lion was later erected on the hill of the Spartans' last stand in honor of Leonidas' bravery.
The Greeks would often consult the oracle at Delphi before major events. The oracle's prophecies were usually written afterwards in verse, although it's extremely unlikely she actually spoke in such a manner when delivering them. Regardless, the following is what the oracle is said to have told the Spartans on the eve of the Persian invasion. For you, inhabitants of wide-wayed Sparta, either your great and glorious city must be wasted by Persian men, or if not that, then the bond of Lacedaemon must mourn a dread king from Heracles' line. The quote suggests that the Spartans believed Leonidas' death saved their city, and was inevitable, probably. It was either their king dies or the city falls.
Though they were victorious, the Battle of Thermopylae shook the morale of the Persian army. They had lost thousands of men, while Greek casualties only numbered in the hundreds, and due to the sacrifice of the Spartans, the rest of the Greek army had been able to successfully retreat and regroup. As a result, even as Xerxes set up camp at the foot of Athens' Acropolis, ready to get revenge for his father's humiliating defeat at Marathon, the Persians were more anxious than confident. They were more aware than ever that the Greeks did not fear them, and were ready to die defending their land.
For the Greeks, Thermopylae was a defeat, but it was a loss that inspired hope. Persian propaganda proclaimed that the Greeks were doomed to be enslaved and killed. However, Thermopylae showed the Greeks that with clever tactics, well-trained troops, and high morale, the Persians could be beaten despite their numerical superiority. It worked. It worked in that sense, I will admit.
In the end, the Battle of Thermopylae was still a loss for the Greeks. However, the battle gave the Greeks a boost in morale that carried them all the way to their decisive victory over the Persians in the Battle of Plataea in 479 BCE. With the war against the Persians finally won, the Greeks were able to honor the sacrifice of Leonidas and his Spartans with memorials and poems, forever solidifying the glory of Sparta's military prowess. The newfound respect for Sparta was noteworthy, because before the war, the city was seen as no more than a bully who forced itself into the affairs of others. Thermopylae changed the opinions of Sparta for the better.
You
Gave
could
them
argue they didn't
legitimate
actually
claim
change
to be
after
one
that.
of Greece's most powerful and influential cities.
Yes, but also they were still bullies. After the Battle of Thermopylae, a monumental stele was placed on the ground where the Spartans were buried. According to Herodotus, the stele featured the following inscription: "Foreigner, go tell the Spartans that we lie here obedient to their commands." The inscription served to remind passing visitors of the Spartans' heroic sacrifice. So basically, hey, you, we died here. It's great, isn't it? I mean, it's one way of doing it.
You finished. I hope you understand the magnitude of the sacrifices made at Thermopylae. Without them, the Greek people would have surely ended as a footnote in Persian history. Is there something else you'd like to do?
Quiz me!
If you're ready. Let's begin. First question. Who was Xerxes' father?
Artaxerxes was his son,
Yes.
I think.
One of the main reasons Xerxes invaded Greece was to get revenge for Darius' defeat at the Battle of Marathon. Another question for you. Which battle is seen as the final victory against Xerxes' Persian forces? Correct. The Battle of Plataea helped put an end to Xerxes' invasion. One last question. How many Spartans fought at the Battle of Thermopylae?
Oh, 12.
Yes, 300 of us stood against Xerxes' forces. You've done well, visitor. I have no more questions for you. Farewell, visitor.
Welcome to Amphipolis, traveler. The Battle of Amphipolis was surely an interesting one. One might even call it anticlimactic. But that does not mean it wasn't important in the greater scheme of the Peloponnesian War.
They don't go into the
The city
Peloponnesian War
of
quite a bit, do they?
Amphipolis was the site of one of the more unique battles of the Peloponnesian War. Two generals, the Athenian Cleon and the Spartan Brasidas, fought for this land in an effort to control the resources it provided. In the end, though, neither got what they wanted. Look for me when you finish your visit, and we can speak of what you've learned.
The land that would come to be known as Amphipolis was originally part of Thrace, a region inhabited by formidable semi-nomadic horsemen. Thrace was rich in gold and silver mines. It was surrounded by lush forests, making it very attractive to outside parties like Greece and Persia. By 513 BCE, Persia had managed to conquer much of Thrace. But after their defeat in 479 BCE, Athens made a play for the land. They conquered the nearby island of Thasos in 465 BCE. But the military prowess of the Thracian riders kept them out of the country's interior. It was only in 436 BCE that Athens established a solid foothold in Thrace with the founding of Amphipolis, a city on the banks of the river Strymon.
In 513 BCE, the Persians controlled the mines in the region of Thrace and imposed a silver tribute on the resident Greeks and Thracian tribes. After the Persians' defeat in 480-479 BC, Athens took advantage of the strength of its naval fleet to try and conquer and control the region's mines themselves. In 465 BCE, they besieged the nearby island of Thasos and forced the city to surrender. Later on in 436 BCE, the Athenians founded the city of Amphipolis in Thrace, giving them a foothold in the resource-rich region. Nice of them to do that. It's like, give me your silver! Give us all your silver!
During the Peloponnesian War, the Spartan general Brasidas sought a way to subvert Athenian power across the Greek world. He set his sights on capturing the coast of Thrace, hoping to seize the resources the area provided. Brasidas knew that many of the Greeks living in Thrace hated the greed and brutality of their Athenian neighbors and decided to take advantage of the situation. He set off on an expedition to Amphipolis, accompanied by 1,000 hoplites and 700 helots, and arrived before the city in the winter of 424 BCE. At Amphipolis' ramparts, Brasidas announced that he preferred to take the city peacefully, and promised to allow safe passage to any inhabitants who wished to leave, in addition to sparing those who wanted to cooperate. This proposal was well received by the city's residents, and he was able to capture Amphipolis without striking a single blow.
Again, kind of proves how awesome he kind of was. Brasidas' army was made up of the men who signed up on his expedition voluntarily. However, the soldiers also received a mistios, which was an allowance that paid them in silver. In the 4th century BCE, the term mistios was used to refer to mercenaries who fought for monetary compensation. That's a misthos there, isn't it? Not mistios. Anyway. God, they use that term a lot when I played this game. I mean, because I was playing this character, I was playing Alexios. So obviously, every 5 minutes it was like, mistios!
By the time they heard the news and dispatched the general Thucydides to defend Amphipolis, Brasidas had already rallied several nearby cities to help him defend the region from Athens' so-called tyranny. After half a day's journey from Thasos, Thucydides arrived at the port of Aeon, but was unable to retake Amphipolis. Athens held Thucydides responsible for the loss of Amphipolis and forced the general into exile. In spite of Brasidas' achievements, Sparta did not send him reinforcements, which forced the general to negotiate a truce with Athens to hold on to the ground he gained.
Well, that was a bit silly. In the 8th century BCE, silver and gold mines were discovered in the region of Thrace, piquing the interest of both the Thracians and the Greeks. This discovery had a significant impact on the region's population and political organisation. The Thracians had the slaves necessary to mine resources, but they lacked the experts and technicians to do so efficiently. Fortunately for them, the Greeks had the mining expertise they required, as well as wine, which was very appreciated by the Thracians. An alliance was born, and the Thracians and the Greeks lived and worked together to profit off the land's rich resources. What's that got to do with Thucydides? Is a shame? Aside from the fact that they probably lost that, maybe?
The matter of how to deal with Amphipolis divided Athens. The politician Nicias, as well as the city of Sparta, hoped that peace could be negotiated. However, the popular Athenian statesman and general Cleon wanted to continue fighting the war. Indecision continued until 422 BCE, when Cleon was elected as one of Athens' strategists. This decision made it clear that the city's people were in favor of war. The truce was ended, and Cleon began his journey to Amphipolis, retaking small towns that had been conquered by Brasidas along the way. On arriving at the port of Aeon, Cleon requested troops from the king of Macedonia. He also hired several Thracian mercenaries to bolster his force's numbers. Afterwards, all Cleon could do was wait for the remainder of his reinforcements.
Aeon was a port located around 5 kilometers from Amphipolis. Possibly built by the Parians, it eventually became the residence of a Persian governor. Despite the Persians' general retreat from the region in 480 BCE, a Persian garrison remained in Aeon until 476 BCE. This was when Athens laid siege to the port in the hopes of gaining access to the area's mines, forests and hinterlands. The Athenian general leading the siege offered the Persians the chance to freely withdraw, but the offer wasn't accepted. According to Herodotus, when the Persians ran out of food, their commander Borgus killed his wife, children, concubines and servants, dumped Aeon's riches into the water, and then threw himself into the raging flames of a giant pyre. As you do. Afterwards, the Athenians occupied Aeon, but they were unable to exploit the nearby mines until the construction of Amphipolis decades later. It's one way to stop your enemies from doing stuff.
While they waited, the Athenian forces began to resent Cleon's hesitation to attack. They saw him as soft and incompetent, especially compared to their opponent, Brasidas. Sensing the tension, Cleon decided to act without waiting for reinforcements to arrive.
Silly
He
fool.
set out from the port of Aeon to observe Amphipolis, setting up a camp on a nearby hill. To Cleon's surprise, Amphipolis appeared to be completely unprotected, with no guards stationed at the city's gates and ramparts. However, the city's lack of protection was only an illusion.
It was an illusion.
Even so, upon seeing this, Cleon regretted that he did not bring wooden towers, which would have allowed him to easily recapture the city.
Stupid fool. The battle between Brasidas and Cleon was indicative of many changes that would soon affect Greek warfare. For example, the battle precipitated a change in how armies recruited their soldiers. Instead of recruiting soldiers hailing from a city's traditional elite, armies began hiring professional soldiers with skills worth paying for. This shift led to the eventual introduction... there meant to be an "of" there? I don't know. This shift led to the eventual introduction of bronze coins that could be used by soldiers to purchase food from merchants, who also began accompanying armies on their campaigns. Pretty sure there'd be an "of" in there.
Brasidas positioned his own troops in a nearby wooded area to get a better view of Cleon's army. When the Athenians began moving to set up camp, Brasidas returned to Amphipolis. He believed his army was less well trained than the Athenians and decided to rely instead on cunning tactics and Cleon's inexperience as a military leader. Brasidas organized a two-pronged attack. He would personally lead a small raid, then one of his lieutenants would follow up with a second attack shortly after, disorienting the enemy. He had barely finished formulating his plan when he saw Cleon's army pack up and retreat back towards the coast. The cowardly display made Brasidas realize that perhaps victory would be easier than he thought. According to Thucydides, Brasidas said the following to his men after spying on Cleon's forces. "These men stay not for us. It is apparent by the wagging of their spears and of their heads, for where such motion is, they use not to stay for the charge of the enemy. Therefore open me some body the gates appointed, and let us boldly and speedily sally forth upon them.
So basically he's like, oh, look at them all there, they don't want to be here. Got no morale, let's kill them. Or maybe he's asking for someone to come and fight them, but he knows they won't because they don't want to.
After seeing Brasidas' troops return to Amphipolis, Cleon decided to fall back to the port of Aeon and once again wait for reinforcements. Unfortunately, his exact orders were confusing and contradictory, which left the Athenian forces in disarray. Brasidas took advantage of this confusion and began his attack. Cleon's forces panicked, which made them easy prey for the Spartans. 600 Athenians were killed, while the Spartans only lost 7 men. Cleon's remaining forces took refuge in Aeon, where the bodies of their comrades were eventually returned to them, though only after being stripped of their weapons.
Oh, shiny sword, we'll have that. Sparta had a complicated and ambiguous relationship with its Helot soldiers. Allegedly, Helots who proved their worth in battle could be granted their freedom. One story tells of how 2,000 Helots who showed great courage in the face of the enemy were crowned and sent off to sanctuaries to celebrate their freedom. However, all these Helots vanished soon after, having possibly been massacred by the Spartans. It's good to be a Helot.
During the pitched battle between the Spartans and the Athenians, both Brasidas and Cleon were killed. The reports of their respective deaths reflect how they were perceived as military leaders. We know almost nothing about Cleon's death, other than that he was killed by a Thracian soldier. Brasidas, meanwhile, survived long enough to be taken back to Amphipolis, where he was informed of his victory. He was buried inside the city, which was considered an honor bestowed only upon heroes, and was celebrated as the true founder of Amphipolis.
The Peloponnesian War appeared often in the plays of the comic playwright Aristophanes. Aristophanes frequently criticised the war and those who encouraged it, such as Cleon. He ridiculed speakers who used verbal trickery to fool naive men and emphasised the cruelty of war in contrast with woman's desire for peace. Lysistrata.
The Battle of Amphipolis temporarily put an end to the hostilities between Athens and Sparta. The Athenian forces returned to Piraeus, while Sparta called back the reinforcements they'd sent for Brasidas. The death of both Brasidas and Cleon encouraged the two cities to push for peace. The negotiations took time, but Sparta and Athens eventually agreed to return to the way things were before the Peloponnesian War. The resulting treaty became popularly known as the Peace of Nicias. Throughout the Greek world, it was mostly agreed that Sparta had lost the war, in spite of Brasidas' heroic efforts. The sentiment was rooted in the fact that Sparta had failed to end Athens' domination over Greece, something they had promised to do at the start of the war.
The so-called 50-year peace lasted less than 6 years. This was mostly due to the fact that Athens was not held in high esteem in the rest of Greece. Aristocrats from other Greek cities in the Delian League hated the imposed annual tribute that they had to pay to Athens, and hated Athens' frequent intervention in their city's affairs. Furthermore, the glory of Athens they'd earned at the Battle of Marathon and Salamis had long since faded, overshadowed by the city's constant repression of all those who dared to rebel against its authority. Oh dear. Athens' unpopularity even, along with the fact that it never managed to retake Amphipolis, ensured the peace was doomed from the start, and it wasn't long before the Peloponnesian War resumed. War! A lot of war.
I see you're done with your tour. The Battle of Amphipolis may have briefly put an end to the Peloponnesian War, but the so-called Peace of Nicias was only temporary. It would not be long before Sparta and Athens came to blows once again. Now, is there something else you'd like to do?
Quiz me!
Feeling up to a test? Then let us begin. Which Athenian politician wanted to negotiate peace with Sparta? Correct. Nicias wanted to build on the truce that was negotiated after Brasidas captured Amphipolis. Now for the second question. Where did Thucydides and Cleon arrive before moving to retake Amphipolis? Yes, Ion is where both Thucydides and Cleon's forces arrived before trying to retake the city. I have one last question for you. Amphipolis was located in which region? Yes, Amphipolis was located in Thrace. It seems there's nothing I can ask that you cannot answer. Congratulations, traveler. Very well. I hope you enjoyed your visit.
Oh, I very much did, yes.
Welcome to Pylos, traveler. This area, along with the nearby island of Sphacteria, were important battlegrounds during the Peloponnesian War. I always find it a shame that such lovely-looking places were exposed to so much violence. It's difficult to take pleasure in relaxing on the sand, knowing how stained it is with blood. The Peloponnesian War was a great conflict between rivals Sparta and Athens. It lasted many years and cost a great number of lives on both sides. The battles of Pylos and Sphacteria occurred almost one after the other and culminated with one of the most surprising outcomes in the entire war. Ah, but I will not spoil it for you. You'll have to experience it on your own. I'll wait for you at the end of the tour.
Since 431 BCE, the Peloponnesian War had been raging between Athens, Sparta, and their allies, with neither side gaining much ground. But in 425 BCE, an Athenian general named Demosthenes changed that. After a storm forced his fleet to stop in Pylos, Demosthenes realized a military presence in the area would give them an advantage against Sparta. Unfortunately, the fleet's strategists did not believe him, and left Demosthenes in Pylos with 5 triremes and 1,000 men. The Spartans, meanwhile, were too busy celebrating a religious festival to notice the enemy on their doorstep.
Idiots. In 431 BCE, Sparta, a city with formidable military prowess, went to war with Athens. War! A city whose power came from its naval fleet and considerable financial resources. Athens demanded annual tributes from several Greek cities and frequently intervened in their affairs. Because of this, some of the cities had a grudge against Athens and consequently supported Sparta's cause. Well, I'm not surprised. A lot of them were like, oh, these Athenians coming in with their giant noses and their giant hands.
Once Sparta discovered the Athenian presence on Pylos, the Spartan king Agis mustered his troops and fleet. Sparta then descended on Demosthenes' outpost, attacking from both the sea and the mainland. The Athenian general had to mount a hasty defense. He pulled his boats back to the foot of the ramparts and fixed them in place with stakes, providing extra cover. Then, going against all the established rules of battle, he descended with his hoplites to fight on the rocky shore, where he believed the Spartans would disembark. His gamble paid off, and the Spartans did indeed attempt to land at this location, though Demosthenes' forces made them hesitate. One of the Spartan leaders, Brasidas, decided to make the first move by ramming the rocks with his boat, exclaiming, "It's only a few planks." He paid for his actions when his shield slipped into the sea after descending from his boat, leaving him open to many blows.
Silly boy.
The battle raged on into the night and continued to the next day, remaining locked in a stalemate. However, on the evening of the second day, Athenian reinforcements arrived.
When the Peloponnesian War began in 431 BCE, the Spartans faced a unique problem. Sparta's army consisted of incredibly skilled and formidable hoplites. As such, their military strategy normally involved ravaging their enemy's territory and forcing the opposing army to face them on the battlefield. What, burning everything, going, "Whee!" This tactic wasn't effective against Athens, because Athens were hard, which was protected by considerable fortifications that stretched all the way to the city's port of Piraeus. Athens' population, as well as the peasants from surrounding areas, were well protected within the city's walls, leaving the Spartans with little to do. Oh, they've got inside, have they? Oh well, what else can we do? After a few weeks, they returned home to revise their strategy. What if we build a large wooden rabbit?
The sudden arrival of the Athenian fleet stacked the odds in Athens' favor. The fleet decided to hold off their attack until the next day, when they swarmed the Spartan ships. They successfully captured 5 enemy ships and damaged many others, cutting off access to the nearby island of Sphacteria. Then, to add insult to injury, the Athenians raised a stake hung with weapons they'd captured from the Spartans, including the shield of Brasidas. Meanwhile,
they
the
didn't nick it,
420
clearly.
Spartans on Sphacteria were trapped, and Sparta was completely helpless to rescue them.
Whoops. The bay where the Athenians arrived was incredibly vast, measuring 4 kilometres long and 3 kilometres wide. It was even large enough to accommodate the forces of England, Russia, France and the Ottoman Empire during the Battle of Navarino in 1827. Never heard of that one. Assassin's Creed Napoleonics?
With 420 of their men trapped on Sphacteria, Sparta needed to reevaluate their position. The Spartans on the island were essentially the Athenians' hostages, and Sparta could not move to rescue or resupply them without putting their lives in danger. In an effort to save the trapped soldiers, the Spartan leadership negotiated an immediate truce with the Athenian strategists. Sparta agreed to hold back its fleet and halt their attacks on Pylos, and in return, the Athenians permitted them to send supplies to their men. In the meantime, Sparta sent ambassadors to Athens to try and negotiate a better deal. The hasty truce greatly humiliated Sparta, as they were forced to recognize just how helpless their infantry was in the face of an Athenian fleet.
Athens did have a good navy. The Spartan general Brasidas was renowned for his ingenuity and quick thinking. In addition to coming up with the idea of ramming ships into Pylos, Brasidas would eventually realise that the best way to win the Peloponnesian War was not to fight Athens directly, but to attack the city through its allies. Oh, Covers!
To bargain for the safety of their men, Sparta sent ambassadors to Athens to propose a cessation of hostilities. The ambassadors tried to emphasize that their situation was not a result of strategic incompetence or lack of strength, but rather plain bad luck. According to them, the Spartans on Sphacteria did not deserve to suffer further, because they were trapped through no fault of their own. These statements provoked the ire of Cleon, a popular Athenian politician known for his populist speeches. Cleon insisted that the terms of negotiations be discussed openly before the assembly and the Athenian people, instead of in private. The Spartan ambassadors were not as comfortable with public speaking as the Athenians, so they decided to leave.
No, you know what? We don't want to talk. Bye! Cleon was well known in Athens for frequently demanding violent or drastic solutions to situations discussed in the assembly. Ah, mad. For example, in 428 BCE, after Mytilene, one of Athens' most powerful allies, unsuccessfully revolted, Cleon demanded the death of its inhabitants as punishment. Athens eventually decided against this course of action, but Cleon continued to gain power and influence over the city's politics. That reminds me of someone.
Following the failed attempts of the Spartan ambassadors, hostilities resumed. Back in Athens, Cleon took matters into his own hands. After being elected general, or strategos, he left to join the ongoing battle, accompanied by javelin-armed infantry and archers. With renewed strength and numbers, the Athenians landed on Sphacteria and engaged their enemy. The battle was hard fought, but they eventually managed to surround the remaining Spartans. It was then that Cleon invited the Spartans to surrender, as he hoped to return to Athens with prisoners. The Spartans were exhausted after spending 72 days on the island, so they accepted Cleon's offer and laid down their arms. A Spartan capitulation had previously been unheard of, and the news of their surrender echoed throughout Greece like thunder.
The Athenian force that landed on Sphacteria was made up of hoplites, but also light infantry, archers, and I'm looking at the jar. I'll make my comment in a minute. And peltasters. This gave them an edge over the Spartan army, which adhered to the usual strategy of forming its hoplites into a phalanx. The Spartan hoplites tried advancing on the Athenian hoplites, but were consistently harassed on all sides by the Athenian light infantry. Whenever the Spartans tried fighting back, the light infantry, unburdened by heavy armour, tried to flee to safety, then returned to harass them again. Eventually, the Spartans were forced to retreat to an old fort, where they surrendered soon after. And I'm going to stick this horse in the ass! With its... I'm assuming that's a shield dangling off there, but it could be... horse penis. Pointy, pointy, pointy.
The Spartans' capitulation completely changed the course of the Peloponnesian War. Athens used their new prisoners of war as leverage, and threatened to execute them if Sparta ever returned to pillage their lands. This gave the Athenians the freedom to conduct their own raids, which were aided further by their eventual seizing of the island of Kythera. Sparta tried to negotiate for peace, but were unsuccessful. Cleon, meanwhile, was emboldened by his victory, and continued to gain popularity with the Athenian people. Popularity that translated to power.
The Spartan prisoners captured after the Battle of Sphacteria were not forgotten by their city. During the negotiations for the Peace of Nicias in 421, Sparta requested that Athens free the prisoners. That is everything you got to say about that.
I hope you enjoyed learning about the battles of Pylos and Sphacteria. The battles were hard fought by both sides, but Athens' victory gave them an enormous boost in morale. It encouraged them to be more aggressive, and it was some time before Sparta recovered from the aftershocks of their historic surrender. Now, is there anything else you'd like to do?
Quiz me!
Oblige. Let's begin. Where were Demosthenes and his fleet forced to land during a storm? No. Although the Athenians would eventually seize Gythera later in the war.
Get it right!
Try. Yes, Demosthenes landed at Pylos, where he was inspired to set up an outpost. On to the second question. Which famous Athenian argued with the peace-seeking Spartan ambassadors?
Oh gee, can't guess who that is.
Correct. Cleon demanded the terms of the peace be discussed in front of the Athenian assembly, which greatly dissuaded the ambassadors. One last
I want to embarrass you in front of all your mates.
Spartan general rammed Pylos with his ship? Correct. Brasidas ordered his ship to ram the rocks and lost his shield in the process. You've passed the test. Well done, traveler. Then I will say farewell. Though I hope our paths will cross again someday.
And there we go. That's the end of the Battle and Wars tour. So again, I'm going to leave you with a nice view of the sea and the ocean and everything else. And I shall see you next time for more of the Discovery Tour. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.